Welcome to the channel, people. Today I've compiled 12 DIY decoupage inspirations for you. Let's jump into it. I came across this beautiful little set, so I took to the community tab and I asked, decoupage or leave them alone? And to my surprise, I received over 100 comments, and most of yous were like, Brandi, leave them alone, don't touch them, they're perfect. And I'm like, who am I going to piss off today? So here are the beautiful pieces, and here's what I didn't show you. I was kind of sneaky. So this little pot, it actually had a little painting on the back of it, and I was like, let me see how many people I can get on board with me. But you guys were not riding my decoupage train, so I'm gonna keep the rest of them completely like they are, but this piece we're gonna do a little decoupage on this one. But for the whole 0.1% of you that were like, decoupage it, you're my people. I don't know who these other strangers are right now. I don't know who you are, okay? Y'all know I'm just kidding. Don't leave the video. Come back down and look at the pieces. So I really wanted to give you a close-up of them because I thought they were unique, and so many of you were in love with the pieces. So the iron and this and the little pot are completely cast iron, in my opinion. They're heavy, they're thick, they're solid, and I love them. This little joint, however, somebody perpetrated. Look at this. It's paint. So I was like, meh, I'm still on the hunt for a tiny baby cast iron little paint. I'll find it. I'll find it, people. Don't you worry. But for now, I'm gonna hold on to it. It looks nice. We're gonna take some Waverly plaster to get a little base over top because somebody put some Mod Podge over top of this. And honestly, I'm not trying to destroy the pot, so I'm not trying to get crazy with it and just cover the whole thing. We're just going to do 2 layers of the plaster just to give it a nice base, so we can take our little bunny napkin, which is in my napkin kits on my website, in the Easter kit and in the spring and Easter kit. If you're interested, the link is down in the description box. Now, napkins have a sneaky layer if you're not familiar. So be mindful that you're getting that off. I take a little bit of Mod Podge and rub in between my fingers and then pull the napkins apart. This by far to me is the easiest way to get them extra layers off. You know, it works 98% of the time. The other 2%, I want to just crumble the napkin up and throw it out the window because it has an attitude. But that's besides the point. You can cut your napkin, you can sand it down, however you want to do that. I'm not using the bunny. I just really wanted the flowers, so I'm ripping the napkin up purposefully in the spots I want, and then I'm taking a small amount of Mod Podge, less is more, and deliberately putting it in the spots I want and then pressing it down my finger. I'm not too worried about the placement or if it's perfect or wrinkled for this, so I just use my finger. And then when I was all finished with putting the napkin on, I took some sandpaper to come back over. Now you want to make sure it is completely dry before you do this. This way you're not going to bunch up your napkin on the ends. And come back in and just sand down around where you put the end of the Mod Podge. So this way it just looks like it's blended with the pot and it was meant to be there, or whatever you're doing this to. I got this beautiful stamp off Amazon. I do think it's down in my store link. I'll double check before this video goes live. And I use, when I'm being lazy and don't feel like getting a stamper, I will put stamps on top of my paint bottles, and you know, they hold out just fine. But I hated this. This did not turn out at all like I hoped, so I painted over it. Then I decided I was going to go for a deep dive down into my transfer stash because I didn't want a chance trying another, you know, another stamp. I don't know why I have things in, y'all get your craft supplies mixed up. Like, stickers don't go in the transfer box, okay? Don't worry, I fixed that. So I went through my transfers and found just the perfect little ones to go in here. And before you go putting transfers on paint or on a napkin, put yourself a layer of sealer on there. I'm using Mod Podge. Don't do it to yourself. That transfer won't stick or it'll rip up. It'll be a hot mess. Just Mod Podge it, let it dry, then put your transfer on, then Mod Podge it again. And look how beautiful this is. We are making wood decor using this 4x4 for your home. I paid $23 for this one piece, and we're going to start out by placing on our miter saw and cutting it into the sections we need for these DIYs. Now, I call this a triangle measuring tool. I think it's called a speed square. I even think it has a different name on top of there. What's it say? Rafter square. It's got measuring pieces on there. It fits on things perfectly to help you measure in cases like this. Buy one. They're inexpensive, especially if you have a miter saw. It'll make your life a little bit easier. Call it whatever makes you fuzzy inside. It's my measuring triangle. Now, for this first DIY, this is the only part I am going to show you me actually cutting. I'm just trying to let y'all see, like, I'm really doing this. Me really doing it. That's my big head popping in and out of the frame. It's really me cutting it. Nobody else. I'm actually hand making these items. I am not going to make you watch me cut every single thing that I do for these DIYs. But here's what we have here for this first one. It is 3.2 inches big. And to start off, we're going to mix this antique parchment and white with a little bit of water to give this a faux bleach wood look. Now, recently I had a subby make a comment about, you know, could I do more of a tutorial style? You know, I guess I can get a little flashy with the editing and I'm a little speedy. That's just because I'm trying to, you know, stay on point with what's going on and don't dilly-dally. But you will notice in this video, I slow it down just to go a little bit. This is about as tutorial-ish if I can get. So if for those of you who want me to slow it down more, I don't know if I'm capable of it. This is what I got. So as you can see, I'm still showing y'all how I just basically whitewash that. And I'm using a tumbling tower block for it to sit on and just dry so it's not touching anything. Once it dried, I'm taking a little tiny bit of the white and just doing the center. This is all going to make sense as we go along, but you don't want to cover the whole thing. You're just going to do the center of your sections. So this way, once we put our laser print paper on here, it's going to really look like that piece, you know, belongs in the center and everything else is faded out. If it's too dark for you, please feel free, like I'm doing here with the paper towel, use it to wipe some off. You know, my paintbrush does not listen to me or care about my feelings and just rolls everywhere. It feels like going. Let that dry about 20 minutes and then bring in your Mod Podge. It doesn't matter what sheen, just pick a sheen. Doesn't matter. Now, take your laser prints. You print it out from your laser jet printer. Cut them up, make sure that they're measured, all this stuff. I made these myself. Well, not really. I used Canva. I picked the images, I put them in the Canva thing, and then I printed it out on a LaserJet printer on a single piece of paper. That's how I did this. But the whole idea I created, yes. You're going to cut them all up in pretty little sections, and then we are going to just place them down where you want them in the middle of the white. Make sure they're as centered as you possibly can get them, and then let this dry overnight, or at least 6 to 8 hours with fan blaring on it. Do not, for those of you who are impatient like me, I know it's hard. Listen, I feel your struggle. I feel your pain. But let this dry, people. Please let it dry. Then use whatever makes you fuzzy inside. A sponge. I'm using a paper towel. Rag would work. Put some water on it. It does not matter if it's cold or hot. It does not matter. I probably wouldn't use hot water though. Just, you know, come on. Put some lukewarm water in a bowl. Little bit of wetness. Then we're going to just press it on our little transfer and then rub. Be careful not to rub too much, because you're going to rub off your little, you know, we don't want to do that. We don't want to rub off the transfer. We're just going to rub it down to the last layer. Now, for this, I did not care if it got a little bit messy because it's supposed to be vintage. That's the style of this. That's how I was going. I really like making rustic vintage looking things. It is definitely an aesthetic that I am a huge fan of. But as you can see, these are stunning. Like, how beautiful are these coming out? I simply love them. And just listen, I know for those of you that are like, I'm trying to do this tutorial-ish, so we're slowing it down, okay? So you're seeing more, you know, I'm just trying to be a little repetitive here, you know, stay on, you know, making sure I'm explaining this properly. And you're going to continue with the whole block and rub, 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 okay? Once you have it all rubbed off to the point that you are happy with your transfer, then you are going to just get all your little bits, get all the crusty bits off of everything, because once you're happy with it, you don't want to seal it with the Mod Podge. This is a little, I don't know, it's a little rough coarse sponge that I got from Dixie Belle. It's, I don't know, it's got like a roughish outside, you know, and then I'm just using it to kind of get all the little crusty bits off and making sure that it's all nice and smooth before I apply my sealer. However, before we throw our sealer on here, I like to add some accents. Accents are like my favorite thing to do. Like, they're the thing I like to do after it's kind of finished and you could really leave it alone the way that it is, but then you feel like you got to take it one extra step and you can't control yourself. You got to just put something on there even if it doesn't really need it. That's my favorite part. So I put a little bit of Antique Waverly wax in some water just to kind of dim it down so it wasn't so dominant and dark, and give this more of a wood grain feel around the edges to really bring out that laser cut in the white and make it look very blended, and finished it up with some distressing. I'm going to have 4 inspirations. 2 I thrifted, one's from Hobby Lobby, and then we have a Dollar Tree DIY, people, with some palettes. I paid $4 and some change for this little solid wood piece at my local thrift store, and I thought this would be super cool to just completely transform with some decoupage and give you guys some ideas. And if you're wondering about the desk that these pieces are sitting on, that was my video from last week. I can link it down below, but those colors really are that beautiful. This is my Hobby Lobby piece that was on clearance, by the way, for 50% off the clearance sticker. And here is my little table we're going to decoupage. This was $5, so I felt like if I'm gonna mess up a table doing this, let's mess this one up. I start off, of course, cleaning my thrifts with my crud cutter. And honestly, it's my least favorite thing. I hate cleaning. I don't want to do it in real life around the house, and I certainly don't want to do it when I have to do furniture or even clean up from my craft mess. Does anybody else hate clean up their craft mess? Like, I could cry. Like, what is going? Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. Anyhow, the pieces were not that dirty, and when I finish them off, I like to take some warm water and get any residue from the cleaner off. The inspiration for this piece is some tissue paper. That's right, stuff you're gonna shove in a gift bag. I ordered this stuff off Amazon and wanted to create my bedroom. In case you're not familiar with this, I've said this in previous videos, is done in teal, gray, black, and white. So it's very eclectic in there. I got some wild looking decor, and I really wanted to create another piece just to go in there, and thought these pieces I got from Amazon were perfect for that. I've never actually decoupaged with this type of paper before, and believe it or not, it was super easy. I loved it way more than napkins, but don't tell napkins. I got some steampunk stuff. I'm not using it for everything, people, but on this piece I am. I literally have a little collections of random things, and this Tim Holtz stuff that I picked up, these little paper pieces, I'm in love with them. Oh my gosh, I can't even. I'm sure I could have Mod Podged on there, but I felt fuzzier inside using the hot glue. And then just went over this dry brushing some Waverly chalk paint throughout the entire piece and went over it one more time with more Mod Podge. But before I was finished, I added on these little accents and then took my gilding wax and went over all of them and hot glued them onto the piece. In case you thought I'm running out of palette ideas, I'm here to prove you wrong. And in case you're tired of me saying that, I don't really care. I'm going to keep saying it. Started off this palette trinket box by clipping one of these palettes in half, and I use these little wire clippers I picked up from Hobby Lobby. Then I cut another one, not the same one, another one so I could use the center pieces. I used my jigsaw for this. You guys could use a miter box. That would work just fine as well. Just measure it, make sure they fit in there. I got these little brackets from Home Depot because we are going to ply them so that they can open and close our lid. This was a little painstaking, people. I am not going to lie. It's tiny. And I ran into this little, I don't know what it is, but I was unhappy. I realized I had to make something for these screws to grab onto because they would go straight through the palette and then poke out extremely bad on the sides. So I hot glued and Gorilla Glued. Love Gorilla Glue Gel. I love Gorilla Glue Gel. And put this on there. I let it dry, and now you can see that once I put these screws in here, they're going to have something to grab onto, and they're not going to just be sticking out the back of the palette. If you go to do this, make sure you drill them in slowly, because if you do it too fast, it will split through the whole piece quickly. I will show you here. I kind of did that. So learn from my mistakes. So see, it started there and I was like, oh, Brandi, oh, slow it down. And I ended up doing it way too much. Look at that one. Just split completely through. I just left it. I was like, I'm not going to worry about it. Nobody's going to see this. It's my trinket box. I'm holding on to it. But be gentle when you're screwing them in, and that won't happen to you. I'm using, now you can use whatever you want. I know Gorilla Glue Gel is a beast when it comes to holding stuff together. I did a Try It Tuesday at the beginning of the year. It's a series I run, and I tested that gel and it's not going anywhere. So I'm confident that this is going to be very sturdy. When you're doing this, you should have a smaller piece and you want to put that in your bottom. And then you should have one that's a little bit longer. Measure it so it fits in there snugly so that your top piece is literally snugged in there on the ends, so you don't have to hold or press it. So your bottom piece will be cut a little bit short and your top piece will be cut a little bit long. And again, once you have this put together, you can decorate it however you want. This is how I rolled with it, people. This is my example. And I did not care for the gaps here. You could completely leave it like this. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. But I had to be extra. So I started taking some pieces. Here's a popsicle stick. I'm just trimming it and gluing them to the side. I spared you the spray painting on this one. You're welcome. But it's just some lavender spray paint, 2 times Rust-Oleum, That's my stuff. And then I started with my clay and put it in a Prima mold. And this clay, I tell you what, I've been using this other stuff for quite some time and just started using this. This stuff is so easy to work with. Oh my God. I can't even express to you all. If you're going to use some clay, this stuff is like, oh my gosh. It is so easy to work with. It's unbelievable. I am taking wood glue and then attaching this, pressing it gently, trying not to get little fingerprints in it. And then I am going to make some little accents for the top once I did the whole trim around the sides. I like using wood glue for this, and you're welcome to use I would not use hot glue. That is not a good idea in my opinion. You do you. I will support your bad decisions. But anyhow, I also think Gorilla Glue gel would be just fine. I picked out some little trinkets. I purchased these from Amazon and fit it in the clay and then pulled it out and of course squeezed way too much out of the Gorilla Glue gel and then placed it in the center. I let all of this dry overnight and then came back the next day, mixed up some of my plaid apple barrel paints to get this beautiful color, and we're going to now work on the painting process. So this is my paper. This is my paper decoupage. And I picked up this paper from Hobby Lobby for $1.99. It was not on sale. It makes me want to cry. But I cut it in half and made sure that it went in the center of these. I didn't want it going all the way to the edge. You'll see see how it's on here. I didn't want it going all the way to the edge. I wanted to be able to see that purple. And then here is my paper for the top, my Tim Holtz paper, and we are going to just put this on the top. And I do put the paper slightly over the edges on the top, so this way that the top looks like it's one cohesive piece. And this stuff is so easy to use. Some more Tim Holtz. I can't help myself. And I literally feel like I'm in love with all of this stuff. Do not use a hot glue gun for this, okay? Learn from me. It peeled right off, okay? It peeled right off. I went and I didn't show you, but I had to go back and use my Gorilla Glue gel. I'm just being real with y'all, okay? I'm not trying to, sugarcoat this. Don't make the mistakes that I'm making. Do it right. Now, the little piece, for whatever reason, that tree, it stayed on there with the hot glue, but that other piece did not. It came right off. You can use an X-Acto knife to take this off, or you can use some sandpaper, whatever you feel comfortable using. I like to go over this and take some Mod Podge to get any little fraying really kind of nailed down so it looks nice. And then when I was all finished, I started to kind of dirty up the piece with my paint and my apple barrel mixture, and also went in with some antique Waverly wax to get that dirty brown. I like to call it dirty brown in there, but kind of looks like a little bit of, anyhow. And then we're going to go over it with some gilding wax to add just a little bit of shine to this. For this thrifted piece, I wanted to create like a little shelf lip on here and took a shim. I bought a pack of shims from Home Depot, very cheap, and what is expensive right now, so go run and grab some of these. You can use, if you have these wire cutters from Hobby Lobby, you can use these. Now it takes a little bit of elbow grease, but you can definitely cut these with these wire cutters. If you have a miter box, feel free to use that, or some other people use I don't know what those things are, but there are other things you can use to cut them. But I just used some Gorilla Glue gel and some hot glue to attach this and sanded down the little areas to get to the bare wood. I feel like it sticks better when you're wood on wood versus like shiny paint and then adding your sticky stuff. Like, I feel like it would come off a little bit easier. It's a personal preference. You do you. I'm just sharing what I do. Here's the clay. Oh, I did put it in here. Yeah, I forgot. I did all the clay at one time, people, and then I divvied up the film throughout the video, so this way it all went with each project. But I did the clay all at one time. So that is the clay that we are using now. I love this stuff and I will probably be using this forever. It works so well and I cannot believe how easy it peels off. The other stuff I cannot peel off with my fingers like that. It actually hurts my carpal tunnel. So this stuff is so easy to manipulate. I used some wood glue to attach this on the top here and did sand down around the little heart just a little bit. Off of camera, you do not see me do this, but I fill in the back of that heart with some wood filler and let this dry. See, here it is right here. I sanded it down so it's really solid. That is on there. So good. This is my napkin decoupage, and if you're not familiar with napkin decoupaging, there's usually 2 layers on the back of your napkin you need to take off. The first one you take off and you're like, oh, it's just 1 layer and that was easy, but then there's a second hidden layer under there and you need to get that off. I have forgot to get that off, and if you use enough Mod Podge, it doesn't matter too much, but it definitely kind of can fray a little bit more if you don't get that off. Now, I was lucky enough to have Plaid send me an amazing box full of goodies, and these decoupage items were in there. I love this little squeegee. That's what I'm calling it. It's a squeegee. I love that little rubber thing. It really gets in the cracks so good when you're trying to put something on. Now, I want to show you all a little trick. I'm not sure for those of you who do or do not decoupage, or if you're going to decoupage after watching this video because you're so inspired. If you're aware of this little trick, once you get your decoupage or your Mod Podge, I should say, in place, and say you come to the end and you want to get it off and you're like, usually I use an X-Acto knife depending on the space, but this just happens to be, I wanted to keep this very, very, very neat. And I'm taking some water on a paintbrush and it wets the napkin so we can easily tear, look at this, it just comes right off. So we can easily, so if you want to smoothly get rid of your napkin and make it look very neat, add some water on there. If it's in a space like this, because it's not always, sometimes you need to use an X-Acto knife or use a piece of sandpaper. But this is another little trick. Some water on a paintbrush and then go over it with your Mod Podge. I couldn't just leave the drawers empty. We had to, you know, freshen them up. So I took some paper. I was going to put some napkin in there, but I was like, it's a little repetitive, you know. So I'm like, let's put some paper in here and throw some more Mod Podge on it. So now it's as hard as a brick in there. It's so stiff. Anyhow, and then added on some more napkin around the little embellishment I put at the top. I felt like it was a little plain, and I could have left it, you know, but I didn't want to. Then thought, let's add our antique Waverly wax. Honestly, the piece looks really cute like this, but I wanted it to look very old and just give it that whitewashed end look, and started with blending the antique Waverly wax on here and then went over it with the white Waverly chalk paint. And this took several times layering. Don't let nobody fool you. Like this is not easy peasy lemon squeezy over here. Like this is Fade, blend, layer, let it dry. Repeat the process. After you wait for the drying. I hate waiting for things to dry. But anyhow, when you're patient enough after you're layering and you're making sure you're not completely painting over your napkin, it starts to look pretty. And then I added some gilding wax to finish it off. This is another napkin piece, but I wanted to give you all some inspiration on how to decoupage a piece of furniture. So that's why I said in the beginning, if I was going to mess a piece up, this was the piece. I took and put some of these Prima molds with some wood glue. I did sand down the wood as you've seen first, and then use some painter's tape to just hold this on. You don't have to press it tight, you press it easy. And then off camera, I took some wood filler and put in the corners on the side. This bin primer is not my favorite, but it's what I had on hand. So that's what I used to do a layer of primer. And then while that was waiting, I took some of calcium carbonate, joint compound, and mixed the Dixie Belle paint up to get a textured effect in with this paint. Now, this is all dry. This is after the bin has dried. And look at Beauty out here just enjoying the day. Oh my God, living her best life out there. Anyhow, this is what the mixture looks like with the joint compound, the calcium carbonate, and the Dixie Belle paint. I started off by just smooshing the paint in these creases around the mold. I wanted it to look cohesive, so that really made the pieces blend together, and started tapping this all over the place. The idea behind this piece was for it to look like a stone piece that it had been just like sitting out in some old garden for like ever, and I hope I accomplished that look. You'll have to let me know. Now here comes me sharing some spray paint, because I didn't in the beginning, but now we're going to, for those of you who love some spray paint. And this was so hard for me to not spray paint the whole piece, because I wanted some of that beautiful color of the Dixie Belle paint to show through just slightly. And look how it just enhances the legs. So pretty. This is where I had to walk away. I know what you're thinking, Brandi, are you putting chalk paint on top of the spray paint? Yes, I am, okay? If you wait for the spray paint to completely dry, it's not going to peel back off, and you can create a beautiful little whitewash look on top of here. It is tedious and it is painstaking, and yeah, but listen, I did it. It's over with. And oh my gosh, this is my last napkin. So in this set, I was so nervous about messing it up, and oh my gosh, it did not go the way I had planned. I had to walk away from this table several times with this blending process, because you have to wait for this Waverly wax to dry before you apply something else with it. If not, it just starts smearing weird. I don't know. Listen, when you don't have anything to dry, you use whatever. It doesn't matter that it's a piece of decor sitting near you. You just fan it dry. Do what works, whatever works. Gotta do what you gotta do. I kept on alternating between the chalk paint and the antique Waverly wax, and think it turned out okay. What do you think? I picked this joint up at my favorite thrift/consignment store and thought for $1, we can turn this into something amazing. For this little number, it had two sides. One side's a chalkboard, the other side someone painted these strawberries on, and I'm sorry whoever painted it, but it's getting a coat of Dixie Belle's cotton. I spared you the painting. You're welcome. No need to thank me. This isn't what you're here for. This, however, this is what you're here for. Usually when I'm going to attach a clay piece, I sand prior and then paint after, but with this piece, I figured someone is going to be holding this in their hands and they're going to be able to see any little tiny inconsistencies with the paint, so I figured paint, sand, then attach. This is my favorite clay that I use. I do have it linked down in my Amazon store. I do have an Amazon store now. I've had so many people ask so many questions about what I use, which is what. It's down there. Go check it out. Support the channel. Much love and much appreciation, people. Hopefully this will help you on your DIY journey when you're interested in the things I'm using on the channel. The main reason I love this clay is it is so easy to work with right out the package. It doesn't require any extra kneading really, and look how beautiful that came out, and I didn't even use cornstarch on that tiny mold. But you might want to use cornstarch, so use the cornstarch. Make sure it doesn't stick. I was being a rebel here and I took a chance. Okay, I took a chance. You can also do this as well if you see any pieces hanging over. Use your X-Acto knife just to cut that extra clay off, so this way it's molded perfectly to the section that you want to attach it to. And I used Titebond wood glue to attach it. And look, I dropped it and it still held its shape. Okay, look, it's there. We're gonna just now attach this piece. Also, another little tip, feel free to use spackling or caulking if you want to cover up the holes. I was being extra here and creating a shabby chic rustic piece and wanted to add the little embellishments on the top and the bottom, and I figured it would just cover the imperfection pieces up that I didn't want. Had this napkin laying around and I thought, we're gonna do it. I actually envisioned this when I seen it in a thrift store. I was like, I know what I'm putting on there and exactly what I'm doing with this. So I broke the napkin up into pieces and started lightly applying Mod Podge in certain areas and then using my sponge to press it on to not get any rip. Now, I've had a person or two tell me that this technique has actually ripped their napkin. I do question how much Mod Podge are you using, okay? Because I've told you light applications, okay? Light applications, pressing, and then gentle rubbing. If you're gonna pile on that Mod Podge and then press your sponge on there, that napkin's gonna rip, okay? I'm not judging you, but stop crapping on my technique, okay? It works. Look how beautiful this is. I'm just kidding. Not everything works for everyone, but you see me do it. I have a decoupage video. Check that out if you want more information on how I do sponging with decoupage. I absolutely love it. I'm sorry for those of you that have tried it and had issues. To tie in the whole piece, I just took different colors of browns and blended them, and then I'm using some mica powder to bring in the bright colors of the napkin. It's a very light powdery substance. It's also got some sparkles in it, so be mindful it makes a mess. To finish this off, I'm going to add in some Dixie Belle's black gilding wax and go over our little appliques that we put here, and a little bit of distressing around the edge to make it look like it's aged and it's been around for a long time. You know, that rustic feel. And for that final mwah, we're going to add just a little bit of gold mica powder. This basket was in really good condition, and all I really need to do was get rid of this paint on the side and kind of make it all one color. So I took it outside and give it a coat of the same primer we put on our first project. Now we're going to decoupage this gem with this beautiful napkin that one of my subscribers, Spoily Girl, sent to me. Thank you so much. Look how pretty this is, people. I love that y'all love me. It means so much. But before we go busting out the Mod Podge, we're going to need to paint the edges. Remember, this is colorful theme. So I'm stretching myself here and going beyond my normal and taking some yellow and putting around the edges. Oh, yes, yellow. I was happy. I was nervous, but I was happy with the way that this turned out. But I gotta tell you, I was scaring myself. For the Mod Podge application, I just applied a little from the bottom to the top and pressed with the sponge as I went up and my fingers. Once it was dry, I took sandpaper and just shaved down around the edges. If you want to use water and then shave down around the edges, you go right ahead. Took some of these half wooden beads, glued them onto the sides, painted them blue. We're going to also add a little bit of twine and some green, you know, green ribbon, green vine ribbon from Hobby Lobby around the top. And that's going to be it for this one, people. Making over this old rocking chair, and it's in really good shape. It does have some stains on it, and we're going to fix that by using my favorite Bullseye 123 primer. Now, I assigned my oldest daughter the chore of cleaning down and wiping down the chair. However, it's so hard to find good help these days. Look at this. You missed some strings. You do. I'm going to use my hand all right. I'm going to use something. People, can you believe this kid? Absolutely zero respect for the artistry of keeping your projects clean. Okay? I gotta give these things some love. She's gotta make sure she's stepping up and cleaning them, you know? And here's a little bit of Harley in the background here. I don't like her out while I'm spray painting, but... don't you either, Griff? I picked this stencil up at Ross. Again, if you're not watching my Browse with Brandy's, you can go to Ross and get craft and DIY supplies cheap. Look at this, $2.99 for this joint. $2.99. And once your spray paint's all dry, or your chalk paint, whatever you're painting your chair with, I'm just going to put this down and tape it as well as I can. The problem with doing a seat is it just has lumpies and bumpies everywhere, and you gotta hold the stencil down according to how you go. And for our color palette, I'm using these colors that will match our napkin. And I do have some new napkin bundles on my website. I'm pretty sure that this particular napkin is in one of the bundles. I have a couple more bundles that I'm going to be putting up this week coming, so thank you for those that have already been purchasing them. So hopefully I will get some more out so I don't run out of everything before everybody gets a chance to purchase them. And thank you for those of you that have already been placing your orders. Okay, so back to this chair and its little wavy butt cheek seats. Okay, stenciling this was very tedious. It didn't have to be perfect. I usually like going with a very vintage stippling, but for this, because I'm going to go over it with some splotchy paint, I wanted to make sure it was a little bit more dominant than I normally would. So I took more time going over each of the little sections. I left the center completely open so we could just put our little napkin in here, and I just ripped off around the part of the napkin that I wanted to place, and then I'm using my sponge to press this down. Typically I use my Dixie Belle sealer when I'm doing this, or some poly, but I could not find either for whatever reason. Maybe because I need to get some organization going, and I'm like, we're just gonna throw some Mod Podge and then we'll put the good sealer over it later when I find it. So here's a little trick. If you are trying to make sure all your edges and your napkins are down, take you a little fan brush, and then you can easily pull up the very ends and then squeeze a little bit of Mod Podge back underneath of it, and then take another paintbrush and then kind of press it down over top. This will help make sure your edges around your napkin are really on your project, and get any extra Mod Podge in there that you might need. The reason I say fan brush is because the edges are very fine compared to some of the other brushes and it's easier to squeeze in there. Once I was happy with the placement of all the little napkin pieces that I was going to put on the seat, it was then time for us to kind of go over it and make it look a little bit more cohesive. So I'm just taking a microfiber cloth, bunching it up in my fingers, and then dabbing off some of the light colors. I did not want to use the dominant colors like the dark blue because I wanted the lighter colors to just kind of blend in with everything and the darker colors to really pop out in the project once it was all said and done. For the final go, I took some white and went over everything with the white to kind of just bring the chair into the colors and make it a little bit more cohesive. I keep saying cohesive. You guys know what I'm talking about. And then to finish it all off, we're going to take 100 grit sandpaper and we're going to go around this joint and distress it. I know we're not doing distressing week, but Farmhouse does also have distressing in it. And this piece just needed to be distressed, people. It just needed that vintage Farmhouse distressed look. Let me know what you think. This next project is one of my favorite of all time palette DIYs. And you'll need 4 of these large palettes, and we're gonna need to glue them at their little nubs on the ends. So this way that as we are stapling them together, we got that extra wood glue in there to make sure that we have a tight, secure bond. And I'm gonna put a couple little bits of popsicle sticks in here just so that way we make sure those staples don't stick out. So once you have them all together, it is time to bring in the staple gun. And it's always important, people, to make sure that you're using it the proper way so we don't staple our table or anything that's not supposed to be stapled. Keep in mind that this is really thin, so when you're putting your staples in there, you either want to put it on the thick pieces or where the popsicle sticks are. I am showing you here that I did do it on the ends just to prove that it does pop through onto the other side. So just be careful and add that extra layer or use the thicker ends of these palettes to make sure you're getting that bond there with your staple gun. Next, we're going to bring in our napkin for our decoupage. This napkin is not in any of my bundle kits on my website. It will be soon. I do have other kits available on there currently. This one will be coming in one of the kits, so don't worry. For those of you that like this napkin, I always try to sell what you see me use in the videos unless someone has given me something. When it comes to the napkins, people, when it comes to the napkins. So the easiest way I have found is to take Mod Podge, rub between my fingers, and then to peel off your sneaky layers. Napkins usually have 2 if you're lucky. It's just got the 1, but mostly it has 2. I constantly have people in the comments bring up this little trick and hack. I actually have a decoupage, a how to decoupage video, people, where I go over different methods of how to use things. I appreciate and love all the love in the comments that I get so much, so thank you all for always having my back. Now to attach a napkin, I'm just using some Mod Podge and we are going across the whole entire little piece of this palette, and then we're just going to fold it over and press it down with our little sponge. If I'm being completely honest, the best way to really do this is going to be the iron-on method, and honestly it is quicker for me to use my sponge method, press it down, let it dry, than to do the iron-on method. For me, that usually takes about an hour to hour and a half because I really like to let things dry with each process. But if you want to cut out all the wrinkles and all the little lumpy bumpies that this will bring at your project, then the iron-on method with these palettes is hands down the best when you're decoupaging them. But if you're piecing stuff like this, do not do the iron-on method, because if you do not have that Mod Podge on there just exactly right, then it is going to stick to your wax paper that you have going on there, and we don't want that happening. Next, you're going to take a piece of sandpaper once this is completely dry, and we're going to go in between and around all the edges to get that extra napkin off. And before I have 500 comments talking about the burn method, I know about the burn method. I prefer this method. Thank you for having my back with the tips and tricks. I appreciate you. Next, I'm taking some dowels and I'm just taking a little bit of Waverly's Antique Wax and just staining them. You do not have to do this part, or you could put these, you know, put whatever color you want on these. And then I'm just chopping them down. I could not find my gator miter shear things. They are the easiest thing to use for dowels. I am really going to organize my house at some point so all my tools accessible. But once I cut these down, there was no, you could organize them to make them look however you want. I just kind of wanted them tossed on here randomly, no real order to anything. And you can use more or less dowels if you want as well. It's really just a preference, and I'm giving you guys the idea. You know what I'm saying? You guys are picking up what I'm putting down, right? And then add whatever embellishments you want to the center. I'm just using some wood flowers here, and that's gonna be it for this one. Of all the gems I could have grabbed out of this patio, I don't know why I grabbed this one. Probably because I thought this aquamarine color would go best on the little roofs I have. And I got a special napkin that I think is going to blend really well with it. As always, I like to look over my piece and see what I got to do. It's in really good shape other than it being a little dusty, and we're going to clean that up. But here's the color I'm going to use. I got from Dixie Belle. It's called the Gulf, which when you type in aquamarine, this is what they give you, okay? It's what Google said. This is what I'm going with. And to clean it off, I'm going to use Dixie Belle's White Lightning. Now, I do spray this in a, or pour this and mix it up in a spray bottle. It does not recommend that you do this, but it works fine for me, so I roll on with it. And when I have to paint inside, this is going to be our staging filming area. Isn't it fabulous? Not really, but this is what I'm working with inside, and I have sanded down the piece and I've cleaned up the piece, so all the prep work is out of the way and I don't have to bore you with that. Now let's jump into grabbing us paintbrush. And yes, I have a whole separate box of paintbrushes for my furniture versus my crafting and my DIY wood pieces, because don't every furniture artist have a completely separate box of tools at their disposal? I feel like this piece is going to bleed, so I'm going to take some of this Dixie Belle Boss to avoid that. And we are not painting this entire thing, so for those of you that are like, oh, don't, the poor wood, calm down. Just slow your roll. I'm not covering over all the beautiful wood. We are, however, yep, dog hair. We are, however, going to just paint the roofs, and we're going to paint the shelves. So I put the Boss on them to stop any bleeding from coming through that paint. See how it's drying right here? And this stuff is pretty magnificent. It doesn't take any time at all to dry. And look at that beautiful butteriness. I love opening a new can of paint. There's nothing like it. Except for maybe opening a Snickers ice cream bar. That's pretty magnificent. Okay. Back to painting. On our shelves, I'm just painting around the edges because I'm going to go over these with the white. We're going to sand these out. You'll see what we're going to do later. But right now, this is how we're doing it. So a little bit of this aquamarine or the Gulf color, and then we're going to put some white on this. But we're not going to do that for the roofs. For the roofs, we are going to leave just this beautiful color. It really is absolutely just stunning. But then I don't know how I managed to hit this brush up against the light behind me and off it flew. Well, that just happened. Oh. Let me go wash this. And I definitely didn't wash it well enough or something, or maybe one fell from the sky. I don't know, but like within less than 2 minutes, I discovered a lingering hair that I had to address. Yeah. And I'm sure it has absolutely nothing to do with this one following me every single where I go and then wagging her beautiful fluffy tail everywhere. On the roofs, I managed to be able to just do 2 coats, but not on these shelves. On these shelves, they took a good 4 coats. It doesn't usually take that many, but for whatever reason, this project, it did. Now for the rest of the wood part, I'm going to create a custom stain. Now you can do that several different ways, but I'm going to use 2 different colors of acrylic paint. We're going to use this vanilla and this khaki color. I want to turn this wood fairly neutral, not much lighter than it is, but I don't want it to have that orange hue. It has an orange hue to me. So I want to kind of get rid of that without having it too white and then blend in with our shelving. So I'm just going to put a little bit of water inside of a bowl, and then I'm going to mix both of the colors in with the water, and then we're going to apply it with an acrylic paintbrush. Or maybe this is a synthetic paintbrush. I'm not really sure, but it is not a chippy brush, and it's not like a rough brush. It's a soft bristle brush. Soft bristle brush. And you want to make sure that whenever you do this technique, because it's like a whitewash, only it's not a whitewash. We're kind of doing like a stain, but it is a whitewash because I don't know how. Listen, it's like we created our own stain. We're going to go in with the brush. We're going to then wipe it back. And this is going to, once it dries, you're not going to see it right off because right now it's just going to kind of look like a mess. And if you have microfiber cloths, this is the time to use them. I did not. I'm using a napkin, but I also know how to go back and make sure I got all the bits of the napkin off so it doesn't look like a mess. If you're not that familiar with it, use a microfiber cloth, because using a regular napkin is definitely going to leave you little crusty bits in different places. But when you're doing a wash like this, it doesn't really get stuck in there so much as it would just plain paint. Okay, I'm rambling. So we are going to let this dry, and that takes several hours because we want it to be completely dry before we go about our next step. Now it's beautiful just the way that it is. However, we're going to decoupage, and we're going to use this beautiful napkin that I have. And to attach the napkin, we're going to use this polyacrylic, and I like to use this on my furniture pieces versus Mod Podge. It's just a preference. You do you. I'm not judging you and how you do your projects. And to start out for something like this, I like to kind of take the napkin and size it up, kind of figure out what I'm doing, if I need to cut it, or we're going to use another technique to kind of divide this piece. But first you want to make sure you get all your layers. This one only seems to have one, so you want to have your top layer of your napkin, so this way the back layer of the napkin doesn't come peeling and separating from the top layer. And listen, if you forget to peel it, you know what, just put extra sealant on the very top of it and dry it quickly. That I've done it before, okay? It's okay. For this next part, we're taking a little bit of water and a paintbrush, and we're going to just use that to find the center in between the napkin. You can cut this off if you want to. There's nothing wrong with that. I, at the time, was not completely sure if I was going to use the raggedy ends to wrap around the poles. So I wanted them to be very raggedy and did not want to sit and rip all of it, because with a piece like this, it can be very time consuming and ripping the napkin in the exact precise spots. And I knew that I wanted the napkin to come exactly to the edges of where I put the sealer. But at the time, wasn't sure if I was going to wrap them. So the water and then pressing along the napkin to divide it was the best option for me at the time. So here we're just taking a little bit of the sealer and placing our napkin piece exactly where we want it. And we're only going to put the sealer exactly where we plan on putting the napkin, not anywhere else. And when I'm doing a napkin, and this is why I like doing napkins on furniture, because you can do the tiniest bit and you can easily manipulate it. It's not thick like a piece of paper or fabric. And then if you have to cut it off or shave it down, it's not a huge deal to make that happen. When you have a thicker piece like a fabric or a paper, takes a little bit more work to actually kind of get rid of that excess, or if you want it to curve into something, it takes a little bit more finagling. Whereas with this, you can sand it down a little bit and the napkin will kind of disappear, and using something like this sponge actually helps to just press it down exactly into the spot that you want to do. I also go little by little with the sealer. I don't pile a lot on. It has been my experience that the more you use, the easier the napkin is to disintegrate or bubble or just bunch in certain sections. I actually have a how-to decoupage or decoupage do's and don'ts video. I can link that in the description box for anyone that needs more tips and tricks on decoupaging. I also do want to say the sponge is a dry sponge. It is not a wet sponge. It is a dry sponge, and I usually only use the sponge for the napkins. I get emails and comments and tons of questions about this all the time. The sponge is dry. And the reason why I love using this is because think of the napkin. As you're putting the sealer down on your wood, right? And then you put the napkin over it. Once you press that sponge down, what's it doing? It's actually grabbing the sealer through the napkin. So your sealer, your extra sealer that's going in through your napkin is coming up and connecting with your sponge, and it's actually stopping any extra from smooshing out anywhere or ripping the napkin. Another question I get asked all the time is, do I go over my decoupage? Absolutely. Once it's completely dry on your napkins though, let it completely dry out, and then make sure that you're only going over it in the exact sections that you want, because anything else, once you go to sand it or trim it, it's going to stick. Some more hours later, I'm taking a little piece of sandpaper and I am deliberately, as you can tell, I decided not to wrap it around the edges, and I'm glad that I didn't. I'm going around, look how beautiful that is, and I'm just sanding it down. And this is why you want to make sure it's dry when you're sanding, because if not, your napkin is going to bunch and move with your sandpaper. This way it does not. It comes off really clean and it's stunning. And at this point you can always go back in and add some blending around those edges. I'm leaving it just like this, but we are coming in, like I said, and we're going to sand down just to let that aquamarine, the Gulf color, pop through these shells.
I've been trying hard to keep my cool, but when you're near, there's nothing that I can do. When you're walking in, I know it's true. It doesn't even matter how hard I try, 'cause when I hear your voice, my walls come down. Boy, you are the only thing I want.
For our next project, we're creating a floral holder, and I'm using, this is honestly a piece of scrap wood I had laying around, and I was like, I got an idea. That's kind of where I went with this. Grab yourself a giant drill bit. This is one of my biggest ones. Look at the size of this sucker. And then I'm going to put 3 holes in it. If you want to put more holes in it, you go right ahead. I'm putting 3 holes. One in the center. Make sure you hold on to it, because if you let go, this is what happens. And you're going to want to make sure that you are clearing it out as you're drilling each hole. Now, if you're not sure how deep to go, mark your drill bit with some tape and then go and back and drill your holes, so that way they're all even. Unless you want even holes, then do you, but yeah, it makes a mess. All right, now it's time for the fun part. We are going to use Paint Blue by Dixie Belle in this beautiful napkin I was so blessed to receive by Allison. Thank you so much for sending this to me. In case you don't know, people, the way to my heart is napkins and Mod Podge. So I was so happy when I was like, I gotta make something beautiful with this. So to start off, I just took the napkin and kind of wrapped it around our wooden vase we're making and started ripping it deliberately in the spots that I wanted it to be ripped in. The cool thing about this project is you can use either side of the vase, so if you want to create them both entirely different, then go right ahead. Another thing I wanted to do for this video, because I always use Mod Podge, is use some polyacrylic. So that's what I did. I poured a little bit into the vase, and here's me waving the sponge. Like, here's my sponge, people. Don't forget we're using the sponge. So I'm using the polyacrylic and doing the same exact technique. I have had so many questions recently in emails and private messages, and bless all of you, because I am here to help you on your DIY journey. I do go over every single one of my projects with the sealer. So whether I'm using Mod Podge or this particular project, we are using the polyacrylic, I will go over the napkin to seal it. It also does not matter if you use a sealer like this. It really depends on what your preference is when it comes to creating your decoupage piece. For my furniture, I really love using polyacrylic. I also just feel more fuzzy inside with that long-lasting hold. Not saying that Mod Podge will not do the same, but I really don't want to Mod Podge a dresser or a nightstand or end table, if you know what I mean. So polyacrylic for the furniture. Then I'm gonna take this stamp here, and this is in my Amazon store. I picked this up, and you can actually, I'm just taking some paint and kind of going over it in some areas, and then I'm gonna press it in there. If you want to use your stamp pieces, you go right ahead. I get lazy. So I'm like, we're just gonna throw some paint on here, and then we're gonna press it, and we're gonna be done and roll on. And then I sealed over the piece one more time, and that is gonna be it for this one. And that's going to be it for today, people. I hope you got some learning and entertainment from these decoupage inspiration pieces. Until next time, bye.